Intergenerational communicative flow theory, Millennials versus Gen X in the workplace. To give a bit of background on this theory, we'll start by introducing Generation X, who were born between the years 1965 through 1980. They're the MTV generation. They're more independent, more loyal, comfortable with authority. They make up about 53 million workers in the U.S. workforce, prefer task-based work, and the first to emphasize a healthy work-life balance. Now on to Millennials, who were born between 1981 through 1996. They're also called the Gen Y, or Me generation, more technologically savvy. They're more civically engaged. They prefer collabing with others, seeking feedback from others. They make up about more than 56 million workers in the U.S. workforce, making them the largest. And they seek freedom, flexibility, but with job security. Over time, and through many significant cultural, technological, and economical events that have shaped our current workforce, Millennials and Gen X have increasingly had to share space in the workplace. So how does communication work between the two age groups, despite a few significant differences in the context of the work environment? Here we have a visual model of the intergenerational communicative flow theory, which is based off the assumption that intergenerational communication in the workplace is an interpersonal experience that is influenced by each age group's collective cultural makeup, serving as a foundation for the communicative habits of individuals from each group. By each group embracing their age identity, essentially what makes them them, which in turn allows individuals to compare themselves amongst each other and with others, the theory leads us into 3 to 4 occurrences that shape the flow of communication between intergenerational workers. Here we have the age groups that are the focus of our theory, Millennials and Generation X. You'll see the cultural makeup for each group, such as values, skill sets, work ethics, preferences, and beliefs, each influencing how each age group interacts with each other and maintains relationships even in the workplace. For example, Millennials tend to have a belief more in equality in the workplace, seeing others as equal or near equal to themselves despite their job position, whereas Generation X workers, though independent and individualistic, still are comfortable with authority or have that respect for hierarchy in the organization. It's these differences that can have an impact on the relationship and communication between the groups in the workplace. Afterwards, from identifying with others based on age, individuals embrace their identities, find that sense of belonging, and compare themselves among each other and against others. Spending more time working with each other can lead to more comparisons against each other. And with more comparisons comes with adjustments, modifications, changes, or complete avoidances with another group. So here we have a few occurrences that help shape the flow of communication between intergenerational workers once they've already embraced that identity and started to compare themselves amongst with each other. For instance, using and creating jargon amongst their age groups. That would be Millennials using slangs or memes to communicate with each other in their off time in the workplace as a form of creating a relationship. Yet keeping that jargon or any sort of familiar phrases or words to the age group and not sharing it with older workers such as Gen X, or it could be vice versa, so as to avoid any confusion or misunderstandings that might impair or interfere with creating these intergenerational work relationships or communication in general. Another occurrence, which is also another form of negotiation, is wanting to affirm cultural value without indulging in a stereotype, especially negative. This is called positive-negative phase dialectic. For example, Millennials are sometimes seen as unfocused and easily distracted, especially by technology. So as to not give in to that negative stereotype, a Millennial may be wanting to prove their strong work ethic and that they're a hard worker by avoiding being seen on their phone at all costs, thereby not getting told anything from an older worker, in this instance, a Generation X worker, which helps them to be seen positively by other age groups. In this case, Generation X, who values hard work and while technologically adept, may not be too keen on technology to begin with. It helps foster that relationship as well. Another big occurrence would be adapting to or differentiating between each other's speech and communication skills. This is essentially the act of convergence and divergence, depending on the type of communication occurring between the two individuals. As each age group and the individuals when are comparing themselves with each other and then communicating with each other, they can change, modify, and adapt their communication based on those comparisons. For example, in a corporate setting, training younger workers such as Millennials may come from an older, experienced, and confident worker, such as one from Generation X. The younger worker may tune into the older one's body language to emulate the same confidence and independence to manage the new corporate office life. On the flip side, seeing as how younger workers such as Millennials like regular feedback, older ones may modify how to respond to those requests for feedback to accommodate newer, younger employees. To reiterate, it's important to note that these occurrences happen once individuals are comparing themselves with each other or with others, in this case Millennials and Gen X, or vice versa. There also tends to be a reliance on negative stereotypes that influences how people negotiate their identities or accommodate their communication in order to create or sustain these relationships in the work environment. Continuing the flow of intergenerational communication between Millennials and Gen X, horizontal violence, or otherwise bullying, is another occurrence that can happen when there's too much reliance on negative stereotypes, especially in relation to age. It occurs between two or more individuals that are on the same or different organizational levels. Horizontal violence can come in the form of yelling, teasing, saying passive-aggressive comments, withholding information from someone, or even being talked down to. For example, a nurse who is a Generation X worker and is a bit more experienced yells at a nursing student who happens to be a millennial for simply asking for assistance in performing a task in a hospital. Now, as for where horizontal violence lies in the intergenerational communication flow theory, I leave it as an outlier, as it happens more in organizational systems that intentionally see workers through negative stereotypes based on age, systems that are usually based in hierarchy, therefore leaving little to no room for negotiating identity, or those who are bullied have to accommodate for the individuals who bullied them, usually those who are older or maybe younger, or individuals who are higher up. As we work through the intergenerational communication flow theory's model, communication accommodation theory, social identity theory, identity management, and effective intercultural work group communication theory all have components relative to making up this theory, especially communication accommodation and social identity, as they involve negotiating identity, creating self-identity, or accommodating others through verbal or nonverbal communication. So why did I pick this topic? Well, this is a communication phenomenon that I've experienced myself plenty of times, as I've usually always been the younger worker amongst older workers in the workplace. So there's been plenty of times where we've had to accommodate, or I've had to adapt, or others have had to adapt to me in order to build these work relationships. I also chose this topic because, especially in recent years, the dividing lines between each generational era have only become more defined, as the differences between our attitudes and our responses to tumultuous events in society, our political views, economical statuses, and so on have become more complex and complicated. However, I didn't just want to focus on intergenerational communication in the workplace across the board, involving all age groups. So I wanted to go ahead and focus on two that I was the most familiar with, Generation X, and Millennials, especially considering I'm a millennial myself. So to combine theory with personal experience is why I also wanted to focus on this topic. Well, that was the intergenerational communicative flow theory. Thanks for watching.